lunch for us. And thank you, Chaya Rivka, for the cookies and the fruits.
Fruit. I had 3 yahrtzeits and I made a sign.
Very nice.
For my father, my brother, and my cousin.
Okay. So it should serve Eloi
And-
Nishmatam.
And
Serve to
Bob's
elevate
birthday.
their souls.
And the cookies are for Bob's birthday.
Okay. So today's topic is this, that, or the Adar. Trying to figure out which Adar is the real Adar. Okay? And just a little background. So Judaism follows a lunar calendar, as does Islam. Okay? A lunar calendar is approximately 354 days a year, and the solar calendar is approximately 365. So therefore we lose 11 days every year. Islam follows a lunar calendar and does not correct in order to stay aligned with the solar calendar. Therefore they lose 11 days every year, and their holidays progressively move back from wherever they started 11 days earlier every year. So a Jew and a Muslim who are born on the same day, when a Jew turns 33, the Muslim turns 34. Because 33 times 11 basically gives us an additional year. Okay? The reason why we do adjust is based on a pasuk, a verse which tells us that Pesach is in the month of Aviv, in the month of spring. Therefore, we have to adjust the calendar in order to make sure that the holidays stay in their original proper seasons. This is based on the idea that what happens in the physical world is a glimmer, is an echo, a manifestation of what's happening in the spiritual world. Pesach, which was the time of our freedom, of liberation, so that spiritual availability, which was maximized during the time of the Exodus, that spiritual aspect mirrors itself, manifests itself in springtime here on planet Earth. And therefore things are rejuvenating. Things that have been dormant are now coming to life. Therefore we need to align to make sure that our Zman Cherutenu, Zman Geulatenu, the time of our freedom, the time of our redemption, is taking place at a time that is spiritually conducive to that which is mirrored by the physical flowering and blossoming that takes place at that time. So how do we make our 11 days a year short calendar? How do we have that keep up with the solar year and the solar season, the solar calendar? What we do is we add in an extra month, Adar Sheni. We add in, hi, how are you? Welcome. We add in a 13th month, 7 out of every 19 years. Now, if we do the rough math, right, so 19 times 11, well, 19 times 10 is 190. Plus another 19 is 209. 209, very close, because again, these days are not exact, is very close to 210. Oh, 7 times 30 is 210. So 7 out of every 19 years, we add in this added month of Adar Sheni. This added month, we have 2 Adars, we have a 13-month year. So that is how we stay in sync. This year, of course, we do have 2 Adars, and therefore Pesach, all the holidays are going to come out very late this year, so to speak. Next year it'll move back 11 days, the year after another 11 days, and then we're ready for another added month. Okay, 7 out of every 19 is basically 1 out of every 3. 2 years, it's every other. Okay, so with that having been said, there are a number of Jewish calendar events that are going to be impacted by this extra month of Adar, right? We will start with Purim, the most obvious one. We'll move on to a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah. When does the child actually become Bnei Mitzvah, and then we will discuss yahrtzeits, right? The anniversary of a person's passing. How is that observed in a year? Let's say the person passed away in the month of Adar, in a year where there's only one Adar. So in a year where we have two Adars, which Adar is considered to be the yahrtzeit? We're going to see that it's not going to be a consistent approach throughout, and we're going to gain some understandings in why we have these different approaches when it comes to different things. So again, the most obvious of issues that comes up is, when do we celebrate the holiday of Purim? That's the most, and that would seem to be very conclusive. Whenever we celebrate Purim, that must be the real Adar. So let's go first to the first source. We have it both in Hebrew and in English, and it's a big block of Gemara. I've underlined the parts that we're going to be doing in the Hebrew, and in the English we just have those parts. So the Mishnah said, Karu ta Megillah ba'Adar harishon. Let's say they read the Megillah in the first month of Adar, v'nit abra hashana, and then they decided, we need to make this into a leap year. We need to add in a second Adar. So do we say, well, no problem. You read it in the first, and therefore you're good to go. The first Adar is the first Adar. The Mishnah says, no. Korin ota ba'Adar sheni. It must be read in Adar sheni. You have to read it again in Adar sheni, which seems to be indicating that the real month of Adar is Adar sheni. This, in fact, is debated in the Gemara. And again, in the Hebrew, I have it underlined. It's the middle underlined area. In the English, I didn't copy this. Where Gamliel said, Af konas of Adar sheni, shekol mitzvot shenogot b'sheni, ein nogot b'rishon. All the mitzvot that apply to the second month of Adar are not done in the first month of Adar. Which mitzvot apply to the month of Adar?
Megillah.
Okay, so we first have the Purim mitzvot, which is reading Megillah. What else? Mishloach manot, sending food gifts to people. Also,
increasing simcha.
A su'uda, right? Increase simcha at a su'uda. And fourthly,
Rosh Chodesh.
and wait 1 second, and matanot le'evyonim, and the gifts to the poor. Those are the four mitzvot. I'm sorry?
Is Tanis Esther a mitzvah too?
Tanis Esther would not be a well, yes and no. It would apply there also. That's a good point. Right? In addition, we also have the special 4 Haftorah Parshiot that take place, that start in Adar, right? With the Shkolim, the gathering of the Shkolim, Zachor, remember Amalek, Para of the red heifer, and also HaChodesh. Okay, so he says all the mitzvot of Adar take place in the second Adar. There was another opinion, Rabbi Yossi, who said that no, it should take place in the first Adar. So the Gemara says, again underlined, and in the English, the second paragraph, Bishlam Rabbi Yossi, so on the first side of the page. I understand it is good. We understand Rabbi Yossi, Mistaber Taima. His reasoning is very logical. We have a general rule, De'ein Mavirin al HaMitzvot. We have a general rule, don't pass by a mitzvah. You have an opportunity to do the mitzvah, don't pass it by. And therefore, when should we do all the mitzvot of Adar? The first one, the first available. Don't pass it by. Ella, but, Rosh Gamliel, my tame. Rosh Gamliel, what is his reasoning? Amar Rebbe Tevi, Tama. The reasoning of Rosh Gamliel is Mesamech Geula LeGeula Adif. He says you want to have back-to-back redemptions. Meaning, Nisan, Pesach time, is a month of redemption. So which Adar should I pick? The one that is back-to-back adjacent to Nisan, which is the second Adar? Or the first one, which is distant from then? No, Mesamech, we want to bring close Geula to Geula. And therefore, we should have Purim and all of its accompanying mitzvot in the second month of Adar, which is, of course, is what we do. Another reason giving, it mentions establishing this letter of Purim, establishing this Purim, Hashenit, the second one. So from that, the Gemara learns out, when there are two Adars, when will we establish and fulfill this mitzvah of Purim? In the Shenit. So it would appear at first glance that we rule that the real Adar is the second Adar. And that's why all the laws of Purim all apply in the second Adar. The first Adar, we won't say Tachanun, it's not a day for eulogizing, right? The 14th and 15th of the first month of Adar has some significance, but it's not Purim. So that would seem to be clear. That's what we do. Amen. And when we turn the page of our source sheets and we go to the Code of Jewish Law, Shulchan Aruch Nun Hey Seif Yud, this is Siman Nun Hey, is discussing the laws of Kaddish, right? And who gets to say Kaddish, or when is a person of age to properly say Kaddish. And we discuss a person being a minor, right, and not being one who would lead that Kaddish. And we say over there, we have it both in Hebrew and in English. And this is a great Jewish trivia question. A great Jewish trivia question you could ask someone is, how could it be that a child, two boys were born, one boy was born 3 weeks, 25 days after the first boy, and yet the boy who was born 25 days later will have his bar mitzvah before the boy who was 25 days older than he. So let's see this halacha, and then we'll see how it applies to our issue. Imnar echad nolad b'chaftet la'adar rishon mishana me'uberet. One child was born on the 29th day of the first Adar. Let's say this year. We have two Adars. A child, a boy, was born on the 29th day of the first Adar. The nar echad nolad ba'adar sheni be'echad bo. And another boy was born on the first day of the second month of Adar. Ushnat Yud Gimel, and the year when they turn bar mitzvah, einam me'uberet. It's not a impregnated year. It's not a 13-month year. There's only one Adar. Oto shenolad b'chavtet l'Adar Rishon. The one who was born on the 29th day of the first Adar needs to wait, tzarich l'hamtin, ad chavtet l'Adar b'shnat Yud Gimel, Yom Gimel Shishana. He'll need to wait until the 29th day of that Adar for his bar mitzvah. V'oto shenolad acharav, and the child that was born after him, be'echad ba'adar hasheni, on the first day of the second Adar, yiyeh ben Gimel shana kevan she'igia echad ba'adar shel shnat Yud Gimel. His bar mitzvah will be 29 days earlier when the first of Adar arrives. Okay. And now the Rama says, Umi shenolad ba'adar, someone who was born in the month of Adar, and there was one Adar that year. V'na'asa bar mitzvah b'shnat ha'ibur, and his bar mitzvah year there are two Adars. Eino na'aseh bar mitzvah ad Adar hasheni. When is his bar mitzvah? In the second month of Adar, which seems to be going with what we said before. And in fact, the Mishnah Brura says, and I copied it for you there, only in Hebrew, the Adar Rishon lo nikra Adar. The first month of Adar is not the real Adar. That's not called Adar. Ela chodesh ha'ibur mikri. That's called the add-in month. How do we know? Sharei ein korin et ha-megillah ba'adar rishon. We don't read the Megillah in the first month of Adar. We read it in the second month of Adar. So when's the real month of Adar? The second one. And that's why lahalacha, we have all the mitzvot of Purim celebrated in the second month of Adar. And a bar mitzvah, if a person was born when there were 2 months, and the bar mitzvah year there are 2 months, then if he was born in the first Adar, bar mitzvah first Adar. Born in the second Adar, bar mitzvah in the second Adar. If a person was born in a year where there's 2 months, and now the bar mitzvah is only 1 month, then of course that's going to be his bar mitzvah, the month of Adar. But if a person was born in the year where there was only 1 Adar, and his bar mitzvah year there are 2 Adars, we wait until the second Adar in order to have his bar mitzvah. Mishnah Brura says, as we see by Megillah, the real Adar is the second Adar. However, we will see that it's not really quite so clear. It's not as simple as it seems. According to this, it should follow that if a person has a yahrtzeit, and again, the relative passed away when there's only 1 Adar, and on the year where there's 2 Adars, when should the yahrtzeit be observed? In the second one.
So,
Right? Why? Because that's the real Adar. We saw by Purim, that's the real Adar. We saw by Bar Mitzvah, that's the real Adar. What should follow, simply and logically, is the yahrtzeit should be in the second Adar.
my brother, or your side, was the first of Adar. So I lit the candle. So are we learning that it is a possibility it should have been the second?
We're going to see. We're going to see
Another candle.
another candle. We'll soon see. Yes, Dov?
Just a thought. If there's 2 Adar, and Purim is going to be closer to Pesach than the second, that makes sense because Moshe died in the first.
Okay. I'm not sure if I'm following that.
No.
Dov?
Moshe died in the first Adar.
Moshe died in Adar. There weren't 2 Adars that year.
That's what I'm saying. So maybe that's another reason to separate.
Okay.
That's another.
Okay. Let's take a look, before we see what the Shulchan Aruch says about yahrtzeit, there's another issue where this comes up. And that would be by a neder, an oath. If I take an oath that something is prohibited to me until Adar, so how do we view that? Let's see that Mishnah in Nedarim 63a. Samach Gimel Amud Aleph. We have it both in Hebrew and in English. Konem yayin, sha'ani to'em lishana. I take upon myself an oath. I will not taste any wine for a year. Nit'abra hashana. And then, guess what? They added on another month that year. Asur ba uva ibura. Now, just quickly to clarify, I mentioned that we have a set calendar. 7 out of every 19 years, we have the extra month. That's our set calendar. It used to be before in the time that we had the Sanhedrin, the Jewish Supreme Court, so they would decide which years would become a leap year. It wasn't set already in advance. They would decide when it would be. So a person made a net based on the seasons, based on when the different dates of holidays will come out, based on a number of factors. So a person made an oath not to taste wine for a year, and then it became a leap year. So is it 12 months or is it 13 months? The Mishnah rules, asur ba uva ibura. So therefore, it's until that date comes around again, even though it'll be 13 months hence, he's prohibited from that day, in that year, uba ibura, and the extra month. If he said, ad rosh Adar, he said, I'm not going to have any wine until the beginning of the month of Adar. Ad rosh Adar harishon. That means until the beginning of Adar Rishon. Ad sof Adar, until the end of Adar. Ad sof Adar harishon. Until the end of Adar Rishon. Now, the Gemara brings another opinion, who says that we look at the second Adar. However, so this seems to be going against what we've just established. We've established the real Adar when it comes to Purim. The real Adar when it comes to Bnei Mitzvah is the second Adar. Yet when it comes to oaths, the Mishnah says the real Adar is the first Adar. However, this is not really an issue, because we have a general rule when it comes to oaths that we go after Lashon Bnei Adam. When a person makes an oath, we follow, what do people mean? What do people mean? When a person says until Adar, do they mean until the first Adar? Do they mean until the second Adar? Right? Sort of like a South African just now. Right? Just now means different things to an American and to a South African. To an American, just now means I'm waiting. To a South African, just now means
The next 24 hours.
well, not necessarily. Right? Whenever.
Whenever.
We'll get to it just now. It's like an American saying, we'll get to it when we get to it. Okay? So by a neder, if an American will make a neder saying just now, it means just now. If a South African makes a neder saying just now, it means just whenever. So by a neder, we follow the Lashon Bnei Adam. So therefore, the Mishnah was saying that in the time of the Mishnah, when a person made a neder until Adar, what did that mean to the person? Even though that person was going to observe all the mitzvot of Purim in the second Adar, what did that mean to the person? It meant the first Adar. So this is not really attesting to what is the real Adar. It's simply attesting to what does a person mean when he says this, when he makes such an oath. Now let's come to yahrtzeit. Because yahrtzeit, could you mention lighting a candle? So we'll light another candle, right? But there are some people who fast when they have a yahrtzeit, okay? In which case, let's say a person fasts every yahrtzeit, so that's almost like a neder. Something that one does repeatedly takes on the seriousness of an oath. So therefore the yahrtzeit, the anniversary of the passing of one of the relatives for whom we mourn, that might go into this category of a neder. And therefore it would be dependent not on the real Adar, but it would be on what that person had in mind, what that person considers.
So you don't have to say the words, you just need, the action is the word in that case?
So in regard to many things, I would say if a person does something 3 times, right, so then in a way that is a somewhat commitment to keep on doing it.
But
Unless one clearly states, or it's clear that the person, wasn't accepting upon themselves.
so
as a neder.
therefore, a neder can be made by action and not necessarily by
Correct.
verbally.
Correct. Yes.
The people that fast for yahrtzeit, is that like do they do it just for parent yahrtzeit or grandparent yahrtzeit?
So a yahrtzeit, a real yahrtzeit is only for a person for whom one mourns. And those are the 7 relatives, right? 2 upper generation parents, 2 down generation, children, son, daughter, 3 parallel generations, brother, sister, spouse.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's see what the Shulchan Aruch says when it comes to a yahrtzeit. And then we'll hear a very, very fascinating explanation that Rav Shechter would quote from Rav Soloveitchik about how to view this. Shulchan Aruch says, and we have that over here, you have that on your sheets. This is in Hilchot Ta'anis, in the laws of fasting. That's what we discuss the yahrtzeit. Kisheira Yom Shemet Aviv Oimo Ba'adar. If the yahrtzeit for a parent is in the month of Adar, V'hashana Me'uberet, and now this year for the yahrtzeit there are 2 Adars, the Shulchan Aruch, which is what the Sfardim will follow, says Yit'aneh Ba'adar Sheni. You'll fast on the 2nd Adar. Okay? And that's consistent. That's the real Adar. That's what we've been saying all along. The Rama says, right, we discussed this before, that Rav Moshe Isuliz was writing his code of Jewish law at the same time that Rav Yosef Karo in Sfat was writing his code of Jewish law. And the Shulchan Aruch of Rav Yosef Karo's came out first, and he sent it to Rav Moshe Isuliz for his approval. And he had been working a life work on the same nature. So instead of publishing his own Shulchan Aruch, because there were many things written by Rav Yosef Karo, which was the adopted customs of the Sephardic world. But the Ashkenazic world had different traditions and different customs. So instead of him publishing his own Shulchan Aruch, and we'd be splitting Israel apart between these 2 different communities, he adopted the Shulchan Aruch of Rav Yosef Karo, but wrote notes, wrote a gloss. As over here he writes, V'yesh omrim, and there are those that say, D'yit'aneh barishon, that he should fast in the 1st Adar. Im lo shemet b'shnat ha'ibor ba'adar sheni, da'az nogan ladon b'sheni. Of course, if the person passed away in a year where there were 2 Adars, and passed away in the 2nd Adar, then on a yahrtzeit year where there are 2 Adars, yes, I would agree with the Shulchan Aruch, with the Yosef Karo, that we do the 2nd one. However, in a year, if the person passed away in Adar, and now on the yahrtzeit year there are 2 Adars, he passed away, there was 1 Adar, in the yahrtzeit year there are 2 Adars, then there are those that say, he says, you should fast in the 1st one. V'chein ha-minhag, and that is our custom. Lehit anot berishon, to fast in the 1st one. Mir yesh machmir, and there are those who take on a stringency, lehit anot b'shnehem, to fast both of them. Now, at first glance, we would say, oh, this is like that Mishnah we saw in Nedarim, when a person takes an oath. That's not dependent on the real Adar. What's it dependent on? What does a person mean? What does a person think when they say it? And therefore it would seem that in the Sephardic world, it was understood if a person says, I'm going to fast on my father's or my mother's yahrtzeit, which comes out in Adar, then in the Sephardic world that meant the second Adar. And in the Ashkenazic world that meant the first Adar. And therefore, if you want to be machmir, you want to be stringent, and you want to cover all bases,
Fast both of them.
you'll fast in both of them. However, the Vilna Gaon says that the idea of fasting in both of them is not simply misafek, but actually it is a vadai. It is something that a person should definitively do. And Rav Soloveitchik Zatzal would explain as follows. This is written by Rav Shechter, who is a Talmud, of course, of Rav Soloveitchik. And Rav Shechter is one of the present senior Roshei yeshivas of Yeshiva University. He points out an interesting point that I sort of just glossed over. We started with the Gemara in Megillah. Which is the real Adar as relates to Purim? But then the Gemara was very strange. One opinion said the first, the other opinion said the second. Now, when we asked why, the simple answer should have been, this opinion says the real Adar is the first. This opinion says the real Adar is the second. But we didn't say that. We got involved in these outside reasonings. Well, you shouldn't pass by a mitzvah. That was the reason for the one who said first Adar. Well, you shouldn't pass by the mitzvah. What do you mean? It's not a matter of passing by the mitzvah. That's the real Adar. And the second opinion said no. No, we want to have Purim next to Pesach. Say, that's the real Adar. So by giving these seemingly tangential reasons, it seems that both Adars are really Adar. And Purim is in both the first Adar and the second Adar. Those are all days of Purim. Again, the answer should have been simply, why the second one? Because that's the real. Why the first one? That's the real. We don't say that reason. We give these tangential reasons. Well, you don't want to pass by a mitzvah. Or you want it to be back to back with the other redemption month. So it seems then, this is how Rav Soloveitchik explained the Vilna Gaon, who says that you'll keep your yahrtzeit in both of them because not out of a suffix, out of a doubt, but one should.
Rabbi, but we're taught very specifically that we should not add thereto nor detract therefrom the law. And creating a second Adar for a yahrtzeit twice is adding thereto.
Well, again, the fasting is a neder. A neder I'm allowed to make. I'm not supposed to add on a mitzvah, but I'm allowed to add on personal things. We can't take a mitzvah and say, this is the new mitzvah, this is the add-on for the mitzvah. But we can add on things. The rabbis have added on certain things. But we differentiate between the rabbinic and the Torah, and we differentiate between my personal oath and what the halacha is. But it comes out then, according to this, that we have 4 days of Purim. There's Purim and Shushan Purim, the 14th and 15th of the first month. And there is Purim, the 14th and 15th, in the second month. And that is why, in fact, we don't say Tachanun, right? We don't eulogize. We don't say those parts of davening which are sadder parts of davening. We don't say that on all 4 of those days. So therefore, the question of Megillah reading was not a question of which day is the real Purim, but on which of the 4 days of Purim should the mitzvot be observed. For example, Pesach is a 7-day holiday in Israel, an 8-day holiday here in the States, outside of Israel, but the Seder has got to be done in Israel on the first day and outside of Israel on the first 2 days. Right? So you have 7 days, let's take Israel as a simpler example. You have 7 days of Pesach, but the mitzvah of Pesach, that Seder, can only be done on the night of the first day. Another example he gives, Rosh Hashanah, biblically is a 24-hour Yom Tov, but the mitzvah of Shofar can only be done during the day. It can't be done at night. Similarly, all four days are Purim, but you can't read the Megillah on whichever day you want. There's the proper day of reading the Megillah. So the Gemara was not debating which is the real Purim. It's all Purim. What was the Gemara debating? Which is the day when one should do the mitzvot of Purim? And now we understand these tangential reasons. The first opinion said, well, we have a general rule. Don't pass by a mitzvah. So when should you do it? The first available time. On the 14th of the first month of Adar. The other opinion says, no. It makes more sense to have it back to back. Those mitzvot, those redemption mitzvot of Purim should be back to back with the redemption mitzvot of Pesach, of Passover.
Could you go back in time a little bit? Who was the first group of people who divided it up, Adar into 2?
Well, we're not dividing into 2, we're doubling it.
Doubling, but who was that?
The Beit Din of Moshe. Once the Torah was given, and we're keeping these, the Hachorjes Elachem is the first of the mitzvot. So then, those first Batei Din needed to decide which years will we add a month in order to keep things synchronized.
I'm wondering if they anticipated all that has to be taking place afterwards. Because, it's so easy to say, well, we'll have 2 Adars, and then they die, and then they leave it all up to other people.
Yeah, well, the whole Purim was not till centuries later.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that's why we're here, to roll up our sleeves and take care of it. Right. But this is a fascinating explanation. So the Gemara was not debating which is the real Adar. We have 4 days of Adar, 4 days of Purim. The question is, which is the most appropriate day to designate as the mitzvah, as the day for all the mitzvot of Purim? So now, let's come back to yahrtzeit, he says. One of the ideas of fasting on a yahrtzeit is that this was a day of din, a day of judgment for the person who passed away. And perhaps it is a day of din, not just for that person, but for the entire family. Therefore, that day carries with it certain observances. Saying Kaddish, doing extra mitzvot, learning Mishnayot, some fasting, right? We do that since this is a day of din, a day of judgment. So then, if we'll view both Adars as being the real Adar, then both dates in Adar of the yahrtzeit are considered to be days of seriousness, days of din, days of judgment, and therefore the yahrtzeit should be observed in both Adars, not simply out of a safek, but rather a certainty, as Torat Vadai. So it comes out there are two ways of looking at this. One way of looking at it is, which is the real Adar? In which case, the Gemaras should have presented the opinions, the one who says that the mitzvah of Purim are the first Adar, because that's the real Adar. The one who says the second, because that's the real Adar. But we don't. We give these tangential reasons. According to the Vilna Gaon, why is that? Because both months are real Adar. Both months are days of Purim. The question was only, which day do we designate for the mitzvot? So according to that approach, so then it follows that the yahrtzeit would be kept in both. However, according to the approach of we'll say the Mishnah Berurah, but I think more simply the Ramah and the Shulchan Aruch, that we're picking one or the other. So then, when we are choosing the real Adar, we choose the second one. And that's why Purim is in the second one, and that's why Bnei Mitzvot are celebrated. Right? The occasion is in that second Adar. When it comes to a yahrtzeit, there it's more of a minhag. So there, if amongst the Sephardim the minhag was the second, it's the second. Amongst the Ashkenazim, the minhag is the first. So the first, and we can understand why it would be the first. If we're talking about a minhag over here, so then it would make sense to say, Ein mavirin al ha-mitzvot. That if you have an opportunity to give kavod, to give honor to the person for whom one has a yahrtzeit, then it follows to give that honor at the first available opportunity.
Yeah.
And that is the minhag of Ashkenazim lit anot barishon, to follow the first one. So the first two, which are as a result of the real Adar, if we're not going with the Vilna Gaon, which are as a result of the real Adar, so that is in the second one, Bnei Mitzvah and Purim. When it comes to more of a minhag and more of giving kavod, so then Ein Ma'avirin, there the minhag of Bnei Ashkenaz is the first Adar, the minhag of Bnei Sfard is in the second Adar.
Well, you don't delay giving honor to somebody.
That's how we would
That's
view
a logical.
That's how we would view it. And according to Sfardim, right, they'll view it as, perhaps more simply, that's the real Adar. That's the real Adar, evidenced by Purim and Bnei Mitzvah, which is also a similar function of that. Yes, Dov?
In the future, they say on Purim, if Yom Kippur is like Purim and Purim is higher level, will we do all 4 days?
It's right. I don't think it's a function of that, though. Right? It's a function like Pesach. We're not going to have a Seder every night. We're not going to have Purim all 4 days. Right? The question, according to the Vilna Gaon's approach, is when is the proper time to fulfill the mitzvot of this 4-day holiday, so to speak, right? Which is the day for, we have a 7-day Pesach, the first night is the time for the Seder. When is the day for the
That's
mitzvot?
like when Tisha B'Av becomes a higher level, it won't be a fast day, maybe Purim will become different too.
Okay, that's always a possibility. Okay, we'll call it over here. Yashikach. Dov, you want to hit the recorder, please?
Well,
Thank you.
can I butt in now?
Sure.
I'm going to give you my scientific explanation for everything else. because the calendar is very artificial.